Okay, welcome back to part 2. All right, I'm leaving off right where I left off. I'm picking up right where I left off. All right, so real quick, just to go over our major takeaways so far. Number 1, a two-front war would be really, really, really bad for Germany. It's bad for any country in a war to fight a two-front war. Number 2, World War I, we see the advent of modern technology. So 20th century technologies are going to come into place. I'm going to go over them in part 2 of this video. Number 3, trench warfare is really slow. Okay. Number 4, mental health and mental warfare was very prominent in World War I, really hard for the troops. Number 5, disease, tons of disease in the First World War. And number 6, the most important one, right here. All right, 19th century tactics mixed with 20th century technology. The machine gun is going to make World War I a very defensive war, which leads to very high casualty rates. All right. So World War I is going to turn into a stalemate very, very, very quickly. Okay, stalemate is a chess term. It means a tie. No side can make a move. It's going over the top, getting mowed down by machine guns. Going over the top, getting mowed down by machine guns. It's kind of very repetitive. No side know what to do. So World War I turns into a war of attrition. A war of attrition means who is going to run out of resources first. All right. Who is going to bleed the other side dry, all right? Whether it be resources like food and bullets or resources like human beings, the most valuable resource in a war, all right? I'm going to pause for a second. Who do you think is at an advantage here if we get into a war of resources? The British are at a huge advantage because of their colonial empire, all right? They've got a lot of resources at their disposal, so bleeding Britain dry is going to be very hard for the Germans, all right? Even though the Germans have technological advantages and military advantages, England's got the English Empire, right? So it's going to be very hard to combat that, which is going to lead to a lot of fighting on the seas. All right, the Germans, I go here, have U-boats, all right? So underwater boats, and they're going to try and sink British merchant ships to try and win that battle of attrition, but it's going to be very, very hard for them. Here are some different technologies from World War I. All right, we've got a machine gun. We've talked about that a little bit already. We've got gas, right? Mustard gas is going to be dropped in the trenches. And if you don't, it's a very, very, very gruesome way to die if you ingest mustard gas, which led to gas masks being a thing in the First World War. If we go back to this picture, right, that's what a gas mask looked like in World War I. Planes, like I said, they start off reconnaissance, but eventually planes were able to drop bombs. Not the way we know them to drop bombs today. Do you know how planes kind of had like little holes for the people to sit in? I don't know what those are called, but the co-pilot, the guy in the back, would just drop bombs over the side. So they weren't very accurate. They weren't very effective. But we do see a development of air warfare in the First World War. U-boats, I just talked about, and tanks. All right, tanks are, a lot of people don't know this, but they start off as transportation vehicles. All right, the first tank went 4 miles an hour. I know that a lot of you guys use kilometers, but it's not very fast. All right, and people would walk behind the tank. It was like a moving shield in no man's land. But eventually tanks are going to develop and turn into what we know tanks to be today. So on the Western Front, so in the French trench, all right, in the French trenches, in the French side of the war, there's really no one breaking through the enemy lines, right? It's a stalemate. Breaking through becomes the number one priority, but it becomes very, very difficult to do that. All right, skipping through this. 1915, 1916, that early part of the war, the Germans are actually winning, okay? The Germans, like I said, have technological and number of soldiers advantage over their enemies. So the Germans are doing a really good job. The Allies, right, the English, the French, and the Russians have to try and break through the German front lines. I'm not going to get into Gallipoli here. If you're a practices person, we can get into Gallipoli. But the one thing that you need to know about Gallipoli is that it is a battle over a strait. Okay, so if you don't know what a strait is a body of water that connects two larger bodies of water. All right, So in Turkey, we have the Dardanelles Strait, right? And it's going to connect two huge bodies of water. They wanted to fight to try and keep control over that body of water. So if we look at the big map, here is the Dardanelles Strait, okay? Not going to get into the specifics of it because it's a little bit too in-depth for what we're trying to do right now. All right, the Battle of Somme, the bloodiest battle of World War I. All right, Douglas Haig is going to be the British commander here. He's going to be called the Butcher because he's going to lead about 250,000 British people to die on the first day of this battle because he just blows them all over the top and they all go into no man's land and wind up dying. So there's Douglas Haig. Huge artillery battle. All right, they actually tried to dig a hole underneath the German trenches and blow it up from underneath, and that is the crater that is still there to this day from the Battle of Somme. Okay, so by the end of the battle, 420,000 British, 200,000 French, and 500,000 German troops are dead. The bloodiest battle of the war by far, Battle of Somme. What went wrong? We're not going to talk about that. Germany on top. Again, despite fighting a two-front war, the Germans were winning up and through 1916. All right, failures at Somme, failures at Gallipoli, the Dardanelles, like I just said. The German U-boats sinking all the British merchant vessels are all leading to a German win by 1916. All right, they're winning on the air, on land, and in the sea. And despite a war of attrition, the Germans are able to come out on top. Until the alliances change. We'll pick back up with this in the next video. Again, if you have questions, let me know. I know I breezed through the battles. If you're interested in those, we can talk about those separately, especially once you guys get here. We can talk a little more closely about that. But for now, just know the white. All right, know what's on that notepad. Two-front war would be really bad for the Germans. World War I, advent of technology. We talked about the technologies. Mental health was a big deal. Disease was a big deal. 19th century tactics and 20th century technology. That's the number one thing to know, and the number 1A thing to know. The second most important is this word, that it turned into a war of attrition. And whenever you talk about attrition and resources, the British are going to have the upper hand. All right? Let me know if you have questions, and as always, be good.